We're going to start, though, this morning with the growing number of COVID cases. Now, another vaccine maker is calling for boosters as they're increasingly alarmed by the aggressive Delta variant.
Now, the head of Moderna says he believes booster shots will soon become necessary as protection from vaccines decreases. This echoes the same conclusion reached by Pfizer earlier this summer. We have a doctor ready to break down what this means for the more than 165 million Americans who are already fully vaccinated. But we want to begin with the growing number of cases and hospitalizations nationwide. More than 137,000 Americans tested positive for COVID in the past day. The head of the CDC says nearly a third of the new cases in the past week are coming from just 2 states, Florida and Texas. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky joins us now from one of those states. He's in Dallas, where officials have raised the county's COVID threat to red. That's the highest on their scale. So, Morgan, tell us, what does this red level mean? What are hospitals there seeing right now?
Hospitals are seeing even worse conditions than they saw this time last year, and that's what's so frustrating for so many of the healthcare workers here all across the state of Texas. We do know that they've implemented some COVID protocols. They're now turning whole floors into COVID wards like we saw last year, and we are here at a drive-through testing site that if we were to go back 1 month ago, they would have just a few cars coming through each and every day. Today, they anticipate more than 100, if not 200, and that is part of the problem here as we see how fast this Delta variant is spreading the virus. I want you to hear how one doctor here in Dallas described this ongoing situation. Take a listen.
I would call it our 4th surge. We're having a big increase in hospitalizations every day.
My expectation is going to get worse before it gets better. Our vaccination rate is just simply too low.
And since June 30th, Texas has seen a 321% increase in the number of COVID cases. And unfortunately, those numbers look to only go higher. Joe Savannah.
So, Morgan, I know in Galveston, a Texas GOP leader who had mocked COVID-19 and the vaccines has now died from the virus after spending a few days in the hospital. What are you learning about his situation and then the push to try and vaccinate more people?
His name was Scott Apley, and he was very outspoken of not only the vaccine, but also mask mandates, anything affiliated with trying to curb the spread of COVID-19. In fact, his last Facebook post was highly critical of the ongoing COVID response. We do know that it has been confirmed that he had a battle with COVID-19, at which point he developed pneumonia. And then later died. His wife also contracted COVID-19. They do have a young child, but obviously that is something that's very unfortunate to hear. No matter where anyone stands on the political spectrum, another life lost to COVID-19. As far as the push to vaccinate here in Texas, there is a movement by Governor Abbott saying that it's up to each and every Texan to best decide what they want to do. However, he is encouraging people to get vaccinated. Joe?
And Morgan, for those who are vaccinated, we're hearing more about the likely need for boosters now. In Texas, health officials say some people have actually already received a 3rd dose. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the Texas State Health Department has confirmed cases of Texans going to get a 3rd dose. They made it clear that they can't essentially enforce people, or stop people rather, from getting that unofficial booster dose. Right now, the science is not yet confirmed whether or not vaccinated individuals need one. However, we do know that in the country of Israel, they have already opened that 3rd booster shot up to people who have the Moderna vaccine. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Morgan Chesky reporting from Dallas. Morgan, thank you.
Dr. Anand Swaminathan joins us now. Hi, doctor. Good to see you. He's an assistant professor of emergency medicine at St. Joseph's Hospital, and we love when he joins us. So first, if you could just tell us, what do you make of the calls for booster shots? Should the focus right now be on these boosters, on these 3rd doses in many cases, when there's still millions of people in the country who haven't even had their first?
I don't think the science is there for boosters yet. And I think for universal boosters, we're nowhere near that mark yet. When we look at the efficacy of Pfizer and Moderna at 6 months, we're talking about 97% for Pfizer, 93% for Moderna against severe disease and hospitalizations. That's still pretty robust protection, and we should be happy about that. I think universal boosters is not the way to be going right now, because we should be focused, in the United States on vaccinating everybody who's not vaccinated yet, and then also globally on getting this vaccine out, because that's how we can really stop variants from being created and then spreading to other places. As far as boosters, I think there are probably some groups where boosters can be helpful. Those with severe immunocompromise, like patients with solid organ transplants, nursing home patients, the very elderly and frail. These are groups that probably will need a booster very soon. And I think that's where we should be focused. But universal boosters are not necessary at this time.
So let's listen to what Moderna's CEO said about boosters coming this winter when it comes to the Delta variant.
Delta is a very different virus than the virus we had initially designed in all of our vaccines. And so it's important to think about boosting. If you give a third dose of the same vaccine that is currently used in the US, you actually see a very important increase in geometric mean titer, the quantity of antibody.
So, doctor, my question here is on these variants. So we know there are other variants out there. There were others before Delta. There will be others after Delta. So is there a chance we could need a booster every time a new variant comes along?
Again, the science really isn't there yet for us to know about that yet. We're not sure is really the answer. We may need a booster. This may be like a yearly flu shot. This also could be similar to what we see with hepatitis B or MMR, where you get a series of 3 vaccines and then you're done, and that's all you need. And the science might end up somewhere in between. We just don't know yet. We have to keep looking at this. And remember that antibodies isn't all of the immune system. There are other pieces that go into play in creating immunity. And so waning antibodies doesn't mean that we are now susceptible.
Now, doctor, let's talk about children. Of course, many are getting ready to go to school, if not already returning to school. If they're under 12, then they haven't been eligible for the vaccine. So how different is the Delta variant when it comes to kids? We know that we've learned so much in the last few months and weeks about this variant hospitalizing more people, and a lot of them are younger than we saw when COVID was bad last year. So what should parents know about kids, the Delta variant, them being unvaccinated, and them heading back into a classroom?
We are clearly seeing spikes amongst kids, both the kids that can't get vaccinated, as well as that 12 to 17 group that can get vaccinated, but they're not getting vaccinated. So we're clearly seeing those spikes. If we look in New Orleans, they're telling us that 50% of the kids that are being hospitalized were previously healthy. 50% of kids being hospitalized need oxygen or an ICU bed. And of course, that underlies the fact that there are no ICU beds, pediatric or adult ICU beds in many of these states where they're seeing surges. So it's really a shame. What we need to be focused on is in that 12 to 17 group, getting them all vaccinated. That's the best thing to do to protect them. It also protects everybody around them. And that's an important piece of getting vaccinated. It's not just to protect you, it's to protect those around you as well. And then for those kids younger than 12, we really need to be looking at layered mitigation. That means universal masking in schools in order to keep those schools safe and open, vaccinating everybody around them, and then also distancing and not doing those indoor things with large groups.
All right, Dr. Anand Swaminathan, lots of good advice there as kids head back to school. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
The clock is ticking this morning for New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. He's now facing a new deadline following that damning report by the state's attorney general accusing him of sexually harassing nearly a dozen women. State lawmakers have given Governor Cuomo until August 13th, that's next Friday, to provide any final evidence in his defense as they wrap up their impeachment probe. This comes as calls grow louder for the governor to resign. NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns is monitoring these latest developments from Albany. So, Dasha, Governor Cuomo, he's showing no signs of backing down. How's his office responding to that deadline to submit evidence? And then the big question is what happens after August 13th?
Right, Joe, good morning. The governor's team is responding to that request for evidence, putting out a statement yesterday saying that the governor is grateful for the opportunity and that we will be cooperating. And Joe, what this does is it gives us a little bit of a sense of the timeline here. The Judiciary Committee will be meeting on Monday morning to discuss the next steps. Then they will get that evidence from Governor Cuomo's legal team on Friday. They'll need to review that evidence and then wrap up their investigation, which they say is close to completion, but we don't know exactly what that means. But I'll tell you, I've been speaking to lawmakers here, and from my conversations, it's looking like a timeline of around early September when we'll see those articles of impeachment drafted and potentially see a vote. Now, some lawmakers I've been speaking with, particularly Republicans, say that's taking far too long. They want to see a vote tomorrow. But Democrats I've talked to say they want to make sure this process is thorough, that the evidence is airtight. And this seems to be the timeline they're comfortable with at this point, Joe.
We should note this impeachment probe is not just limited to the sexual harassment allegations. And you said you've been speaking with lawmakers. Right. You spoke with one of the lawmakers on the Judiciary Committee. What did you learn about what else is being considered here?
Yeah, there was actually an impeachment probe launched earlier this year looking at allegations of potential misuse of state resources on the governor's book deal and allegations around potentially intentional miscounting of nursing home deaths. And I spoke to a member of the Judiciary Committee who says he wants to see all of these factors taken at once. They want to see all of those investigations as part of this impeachment process. Take a listen to what he had to say.
One of the allegations has to do with lying to the legislature about nursing home deaths. Why is that so important? Of course, it's important to the families of those who passed away. But also it's important because we rely on the executive to provide us with accurate information. And if that's not happening, that's an interference with our ability to write appropriate legislation for this state. So we cannot tolerate a governor telling untruths to the state legislature.
But, Joe, there is some debate among lawmakers about this. Some say that they should put some of those other investigations to the side for the moment and just focus on what came out of that explosive report from the Attorney General around sexual harassment. So we'll see as the Judiciary Committee meets and decides on next steps how that's all going to shake out, Joe.
And Dasha, in the wake of everything that's happened this week, it appears Governor Cuomo is continuing to lose key supporters, and not just that long list of elected officials we've seen. Tell us about who else is joining the calls for him to step down.
Yeah, as we've been saying, that island he's on is shrinking by the minute here. The chairman of the Democratic National Committee and the head of a powerful healthcare union both calling on him to resign. And, Joe, I'll tell you, yesterday I spoke to multiple assembly members here at the Capitol, both Democrat and Republican, and all of them told me at this point they do not know a single one of their peers that is against impeachment, which they all say is pretty extraordinary to see the consensus there, Joe.
Absolutely. All right, Dasha, appreciate your reporting. Thanks so much.
Several counties in California are under a state of emergency this morning as raging wildfires tear through the state. One of the most devastating, the Dixie wildfire, pretty much wiped out the entire historical town of Greenville. It's one of the largest wildfires in the state's history. Right now, it's only 35% contained and threatening other nearby towns. And in nearby Nevada and Placer counties, local sheriffs are warning residents they are in imminent danger from the river wildfire. Nearly 7,000 people are currently under evacuation orders.
Let's get a check on your morning news now weather
with Janessa Webb. Hi, Janessa. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. You know, those images, they're just tough to see as that fire continues to spread. It's starting to make its way north and east, so out of California. And the reason for that, our temperatures are cooling off. And that is wonderful news, but there's just little to no precipitation, and that's not going to help the wildfires. Now you can see the spread of red flag warnings. They have stretched now into the plains. It's just a minimal area, and they will start to deteriorate as we go into the weekend. The problem is this plume of smoke that continues to impact the Pacific Northwest, and then it will transition into the Midwest as we go into the rest of the weekend. Saturday and Sunday, big time smoke going to be filtering in across the Minneapolis area to Chicago. So we're going to be watching that poor air quality across that area. What will help is we do have a cold front that's going to make its way through, and it will spark up some severe weather. So the rain will be in place and hopefully get that air quality up as we go into next week. We're going to watch the damaging wind gusts and a little bit of hail this afternoon, but wet conditions makes its way across the Midwest as we go into your Friday afternoon. But you know what's important? The big scope of things, the weekend forecast. That's what everybody's looking for. I'll have that forecast coming up.
All right. Looking forward to it.
We love the tease. See you in a bit.